Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Hutabarat from AFC, part of the World Bank Group. Okay. We're here to talk about climate emergency, exploring ASEAN's power needs and green future. Okay, so continuing to the message from Pak Toto just earlier. Let's sit here. And we're very fortunate, actually. Today we have 3 distinguished panelists. I'll let them later introduce themselves as they answer their first question. But today we want to talk more about the power requirements for ASEAN digital infrastructure and how we incorporate renewable energy and green power as we transform the digital infrastructure in the region, and to ensure that as we incorporate these green initiatives into our sector, it still make commercial sense. We have here Wandrille from Engie, Bertrand from Natixis, and Paul from Schneider Electric. So we'll get started. I will start with you, Wandrille, talking about the challenges of green energy or renewable energy procurement in Asia region. You're looking at Indonesia and other parts of the region. Where do you see the potential for integrating this renewable energy? What are the challenges you see, and which countries specifically that you think that will be a good opportunity as we build this digital infrastructure, data center, and so on going forward?
Very good questions. I hope you have 45 minutes because it's only going to be about the intro. So joke aside, I'm Wandrille, Doucerain, based in Singapore, working for Engie. Engie is a large energy player. Just a few facts for the corporate minute, and then I move to what I do and answer your question. This year we are building, as we speak, 7 gigawatts of green power across the globe. And we have signed 2 gigawatts of green PPA, and 80% of that goes to data center players. So data center players are by far the largest buyers of green power, and we are one of the largest independent group to develop green power in the world, multi-technologies. So we mentioned geothermal, of course, that's one of them. Hydro, of course, solar, wind, onshore, offshore, you name it. And we're looking at many other type of green technologies such as green backup and all of that. So applied to data center market and data center players is actually applying that is my role. So that's what I do in the region. And back to your question. So in APAC, so if we let alone China, which is a specific continent in itself, and with a few specific rules. And we touch upon Southeast Asia, if that's okay. My comment is going to be mostly about Southeast Asia. So we're not there yet. So we're coming from Europe and the US, and all the figures that I gave you, 75% of that come from Europe and US. In APAC, we only develop as Engie green power through solar, but it's fairly limited, and I'll come back to that, and offshore wind. Offshore wind is a very promising, obviously, technologies with a lot of potential. Unfortunately, not too much in Indonesia. In Indonesia, we develop 180 megawatt of geothermal plant together with PLN and some Japanese partners. So it's possible to develop geothermal, but geothermal takes 10 years to develop. Just don't raise your hope too high in terms of I'm gonna get green power tomorrow. Geothermal takes 10 years. Offshore wind takes 5 years. Solar takes 2 years. So that's important to have when you're going to develop your growth plan, including in Indonesia. This is what it's going to take. Another element to your question is a comparison with Europe. So in Europe, green power has been abundantly developed on the back of 2 things. First, physical interconnection between the markets. So that's something we're going to touch upon quickly. And second, unbundling, deregulation. So all the national monopolies have been broken. to allow competition. So that was what Toto was saying. Can we deregulate the transmission? The answer is yes. Of course, it doesn't go in one go. It requires a lot of political willingness to do so. Coming from Singapore and touching upon the interconnection between the countries, there's one example that's making me very optimistic on the fact that it could happen, is that there is actually today a deal, a green PPA between Laos and Singapore that goes through from the grid of Laos, interconnected with Thailand, interconnected with Malaysia, interconnected with Singapore. 100 megawatt coming from hydro. So it de facto exists. Keppel took it. So that's clearly one of the evolution that we see happening in Southeast Asia. Talking about green imports, etc. Batam is on the map for that. Johor is on the map for that, to bring green power to Singapore. But obviously, if you're Indonesia, you want green power for yourself. But this, of course, is subject to regulation and obviously willingness to make two things happen. Virtual PPA. So it's something that we cannot do in Indonesia, and something that we should be able to do according to PLN rules, and they will obviously make the guidelines. I hope that is going to happen one day. And of course, the ability to recognize your RECs, renewable energy certificates, to come back to the geothermal example that I had. During these few years of operation of this very large asset, 180 megawatt of geothermal is huge. It's more than 100 million USD of investment, and it's 5 years to just drill to make sure that you have the resource. We could not use the RECs, and we have millions of RECs that we could actually use, but the regulation doesn't allow us to do so. So optimistic, but we're not there yet. And back to your question, yes, interconnection is actually one of the key elements to make it happen.
Thanks, Wandrille. And Bertrand or Paul, if you want to add anything to that?
No, more than happy to do that, and thank you for the invite, combining my two passion, renewable energy and digital infra. Natixis, we are a bank, and we are top 3 for renewable energy financing in the world. Number 1 in APAC for M&A in renewable energy, in the top 10 for data center, and certainly in Asia in the top 4 for hyperscale. And it has been like that for many, many years. So we've been looking at that for quite a while, actually. And I would say provocatively, everywhere. Everywhere you will have more and more renewable energy. But after that, as Pak Toto was saying, it's a question of cost. It's a question of cost, and for renewable energy, it's also a question of subsidies. Because for the moment, renewable energy is still heavily subsidized. And if you look at administrated countries, that's why it's important to have a bank and a financial advisor from time to time. The retail price does not reflect the inputs. It's going to come. It's not totally reflected in inflation. Some countries are very proud of their inflation level, but the output is not a function of inputs. So let's be very careful on that. Second, you will have some arbitrage to make in lots of countries that need green electron. You're creating new demand. But you're not the only one. In Indonesia, nickel mining, HPAL, batteries, they need desperately green energy. And they would be much more under focus than off-takers of colo, managed services, etc. All the big companies will need green energy, whether you offset or not. So it's everywhere possible. Just be vigilant on the long-term prospect of the cost, especially if you look at AI, assuming, and we'll discuss that AI needs more electron at some point. But everything that is above 1 time on the PUE is for you, guys. So it's going to cost some more. So very important to make sure you have sustainability, and also for your bankers, because I just repeat, but we are here to accompany you, but we are not here for sharing your upside. We are just here to share your downside. So we want to be repaid. Huh?
Thank you. Yeah, it is a good reminder that digital infrastructure is not the only sector who will demand renewable energy going forward. There are many other industries will also focus on getting more of this. Yeah. So Paul, anything to add to this?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Paul Chapman from Schneider Electric. my responsibility is for the data center business across Asia Pacific. Schneider don't actually create energy, but what we do is we manufacture systems and solutions to help people save energy. And we're a very sustainable organization. It's probably a question, but also it's a response, but also a question. And I guess it's for Wandrille. You mentioned before that renewable energy is available to all countries across Asia Pacific. We know that China and Singapore and Australia and India, South Korea have taken the lead because of regulation, and there's some really strong regulatory systems in place. But in terms of the more developing countries, what do the developing countries need to, or the less mature countries, what do they need to do?
Well, they need to do exactly the same, give visibility. Any investor, so Engie would be an investor in that case, would like to have an understanding on the tariff that you're going to get for 20 years. That's usually the length of the PPA that we sign. So obviously, you develop a data center, you're going to do exactly the same. What is my megawatt, my USD per megawatt, and then you will just make sure that it works from a financial basis. And so what's been hurting a bit our development, back to your question also, it's another way to reply, are the changing of regulation along the way. Just to give you an example, we were able to develop 100 megawatt of solar in Malaysia 5 years ago. And then the regulation changed. Now it's only 29 megawatt by 29 megawatt, and only one developer can take 29 megawatt, not 30, at a time. And so obviously, when you develop the teams, when you develop the knowledge, when you develop, your ecosystem, and it's not only Engie, it's people depending, the whole ecosystem, the EPC, etc. And you come back to them and say, sorry, we're going to divide the team by 5. The job is going to be much smaller, and it's going to be once every blue moon. The strategy is not the same, and then of course that changes clearly the focus, because you need capital allocation, to other countries where it's clearer. And so anything that brings visibility, and there are many schemes, honestly, and creativity is in order there, as long as it's here to stay, it's something that is enough to allow a company like Engie, but there are many other Engies, to develop green power. So that's clearly something that is lacking in some countries. And clearly, just a positive example, Philippines is a fairly positive example in the sense that they allowed a company that is not a Filipino company to own 100% of the green power asset. So that's another element that is linked to your question. Can I invest with visibility, and can I get the fruits of my investment? Okay to share, no problem. Of course, you need to grow the ecosystem. No worries about that. But being able to be in control of your project from a cash flow perspective and from an ownership perspective is something that is absolutely key.
No, thank you. Very, very interesting discussion. And I guess it is really needed going forward, and it will take time. I think that's sort of the conclusion, but we're getting there. I guess I'll switch gear a little bit, and we know, many conversations before, the demand for data center and growingly the demand for green data center also increasing, and that requires maybe some technologies and ways to reduce power consumption and make it more efficient. So maybe I'll go to you, Paul, first, and how do you see this playing out? What are the possible solutions and technologies point of view to help make it more efficient and on the power side?
So it's an interesting question, and I think before we answer what new products and systems and solutions are out there, I think it's probably worth taking stock and saying, in a data center today, half of the data center power and consumption is created through the facility, and half of it is created through the IT load. So if you put things into perspective, things like chillers, fan core units, air handling units, power systems, they create half of the load. So it's important that before we start to look at new technology, we actually make sure that we design and engineer both mechanical and electrical systems efficiently, which over the years, what we generally find is that engineering firms, consultants will generally oversize solutions, purely and simply to make sure that the systems don't fail. Now, what we need to do moving forward is to make sure that we don't oversize solutions, make sure that we equally balance the electrical distribution solution and the mechanical distribution solution to make sure that they work hand in hand. So if you oversize an electrical solution, often that creates an awful lot of heat and energy, which then within the data center environment we have to cool down. So it's a double whammy really. We're creating our own problem by creating too much heat. So moving forward, we can benefit from transformers that are low energy. We can benefit from medium voltage transformers that are high efficiency. We can benefit from new technology in UPS solutions where we use what's called e-conversion. Currently today, in terms of air conditioning systems and chillers, we should be looking at using turbo core, where we can benefit from free cooling as much as we possibly can. And then notwithstanding the fact that wrapped around that would be some sort of software supervisory solution or some advisory software with apps and analytics so that we can actually use the AI that we're talking about today and the machine learning we can actually use to understand how our data center is operating on a day-to-day basis, and we can use that AI technology and capability to make sure that we have efficient use. And I think, but the biggest topic that people are talking about today is in terms of high-density computing, high-density racks, and how do we actually cool those things down? And the topic that people are talking about mainly now is liquid cooling, and there's various different types of liquid cooling depending on the density of the rack, and that's going to really pose some challenges for us because high-density racks consume an awful lot of power. Liquid cooling is going to create more power requirements, and it's how we design the electrical and mechanical infrastructures to create that efficiency moving forward that's going to be vitally important.
And yeah, but how do you see the impact of this increased energy consumption for AI? For example, what are any potential mitigation? How do people like, Engie, for example, or you look at what are the opportunities to solve this, or at least, make it more efficient, as we discussed earlier?
So I'll take this one, but Paul, please don't hesitate to interrupt me. And of course, if you have something to say as a banker, no need to wait for a comment. So let me take a step back real quick. The way we look at it, so we never say green when we are Engie because we know that green is not so green sometimes. So we say low carbon. So data center can be low, or any type of infrastructure for that matter can be low carbon in 3 ways by design. So data center players have been very good at that. So that's the PUE story. That's exactly what's been described by Paul. By supply, we touched upon it. So green power, etc. Fine. So some evolution to be made, but on the right track as well. We have to be optimistic about it. The third one is by integration, and by integration means that, and maybe that's something that could be foreseen for AI. Data center today, that's an asset that is just a weight on the grid. Okay, you just there and you take the power, and that's it. You don't give back. Data center, if it's a twin, typically you have a lot of dorming equipment, unless of course your grid is of poor quality, and then it's very good to have that. But let's say in Singapore, if you have 2N, half of your data center is dormant in terms of equipment and can be used as a support to the grid. Okay. That reduces that's something that is, of course, a way to, if you increase a lot your power intake and you support the grid, you solve already part of the issue about sorry, the discussion you're going to have with the grid operator, give me 300 megawatt. So, and that's it. Thank you, bye-bye. Because I'm big, because, I bring a lot of USD. It's not going to be enough when you're going to do that. And we see that in the future. And we see that in Europe today, in the US, maybe after today, tomorrow. You don't get permitting. You don't get permitting because when you Google and you go to Norway and you say, I need 863 megawatts, so that was the latest requirement of Google. So it's actually one nuclear reactor. Norway, they have enough power, they say, okay, I give it to you, but 863 megawatts, it's crazy. Of course, you're a big stress to the grid. And so AI, I hope, always optimistic, is going to be the opportunity for data center players to design their data center in a double-way street, with the grid. You have to support the grid. You cannot just take 300 megawatt of power and that's it. I mean, at some point in time, especially in growing countries like Jakarta, like cities like Jakarta, Manila is one of them. Of course, the stress on the grid is going to be unbearable in the future. You're going to get brownout, blackout. That's 100% certain. And so, one of the way to think about your data center in an AI environment, I think is one of the solutions is this one. The second piece, and I'll stop there, is that the bigger the data center campus is going to be, 100 megawatt, 200, 300, and you will see so many announcements going there. The further you will be from the inhabited places, because you just simply don't have the space. And so that's a great opportunity, because you need more space, because you have more IT load, and your rack density is going from 3 to 30 to 300. A great opportunity to actually allocate some space for captive green power with typically solar plus battery. A data center is full of batteries. You can already use these batteries to some extent in your design to how can I say, integrate intermittency into your own system. So that's one element. The last one, I promise it's the last one. The bigger you get, I think the best way is to have your dedicated power and cooling asset for your own data center. So we see this in Ireland, okay? You cannot build a new data center in Ireland if you don't build the CCGT that goes with it, simply because the grid is not strong enough. That's the best opportunity to decarbonize your data center. Why? Because you don't wait for the grid to decarbonize itself and hope for the VPPA, virtual PPA, to be available. You can decarbonize at the heart of your operation, your data center, because your CCGT or your power and cooling asset becomes your prime. And so greenifying the gas is something that is under your control and not under the grid operator control. So you don't wait for the scheme to happen, and it's something that you can manage. Back to Indonesia. Indonesia is a gas market. It's wonderful. It's a great opportunity. If you have gas, you can have a cogeneration with absorption chillers, and your system is going to be 75% efficient compared to CCGT that is 45%. So you get the PUE, and you get the possibility in the future to decarbonize your data center at the heart of it. AI is this opportunity because it offers the size to the data center campus.
Anything to add, Bertrand or Paul?
Yeah, I can just comment on that because, and I see Wandrille is super passionate about things, but I was just saying cost, etc. The key question for us is, first of all, where is the money coming from? At the end of the day, there is a customer, an off-taker that sells products and services that will be hosted in the data center that will probably pay more because electricity may cost more. All those solutions that are much smarter and much more efficient may cost more. The question is whether it will offset and you will have a positive Jaws effect or not, and nobody can answer. And finally, we are talking about assets that gets bigger and bigger. If you draw a parallel on hyperscale, I think if you have 4.5 gigawatts of hyperscale today, the valuation of that is equal to the market cap of AT&T. And this can be built relatively quickly. Those are super big assets. Who's going to hold them? who is able to put equity, because even if banks are super aggressive in their financing, the equity check is quite significant, the capex is quite significant, and so there would be a flight for quality. Personally, I don't think that an end customer, the eyeballs, they do care about the PUE. They just want to have a green tag or making sure it's sustainable. And in any case, if it's on the market, it has to be sustainable. It's just making sure that it's not too fast or it's not too slow to deliver the essential services. Essentiality of services, when we'll talk about sustainability, yes, you have energy. But if you look at ESG, environmental, okay, no problem. Governance, okay, I mean, it's all well controlled. It's really the social impact. Is it essential or not? Because you will have arbitrage again. Let's move to frugality on that. So this is what is important, is making sure the growth is there. And again, to come back on the energy and green energy, we are not very much concerned about the availability of green energy, because green energy becomes transportable. Green hydrogen is transportable. And yes, in Brazil, electricity costs not so much. In Quebec, for Claude, electricity, hydro, more than 95%, 4 cents per kilowatt hour. They can do green hydrogen that they can ship anywhere in the world for probably less than $2 per kilogram, so very efficient.
I think, Bertrand, just to one of your points, though, in terms of the technology costing more money, there's no two ways about it. That is true, but it can be demonstrated that if we invest 5% more in the capital expenditure, then over a 10-year TCO calculation, you can actually save 20% in the TCO calculation. So yes, it is going to cost more money. There's no two ways about it, but we need to look in the long term rather than the short term.
Yeah, but not only on the core shell fit out, and the server will cost more money. So it's really what you need to project.
Yeah, agreed.
I guess before talking about the last topic, this technology, you said energy will be transportable and there is integration, and these are all currently in the making, right? It's in progressing and globally. But the question I have, like, do you consider, as you build more data center or you invest more in technologies, do you consider, like, say, Indonesia or the Philippines or other, countries within the region, where to put, or even cities within Indonesia or cities within Philippines or Vietnam, for example? Do you consider the opportunity for to get access to renewable energy? Of course, demand will be key, but also a factor in terms of where to put your data center. Is that something to be considered?
Another vast question. Yes, of course, it has to be considered. A few examples, as always, because we're discussing about the grid, about where to put your data center and where green power is available. Just one counter example. This is going to be managed over time, but Vietnam was very, very fast and very big on green power. The grid was not mature enough, so you have curtailment everywhere. So that's the counter example. Sometimes green power is a curse, because of course intermittency has to be managed. So if you have your data center in Vietnam, if you see the population, wonderful, the growth, wonderful, connectivity, it's not my job, but I think it should be okay, and green power potential, that's the perfect market. But we don't see many data centers in Vietnam today, maybe tomorrow, surely tomorrow, but they have a few things that they need to manage from at least a power perspective, which is limited to my expertise, to which my expertise is limited. Clearly, the grid is weak. And if you put a 100 megawatt data center in Ho Chi Minh City, you will have some troubles because the grid, the power is not so good, but it can be almost green. And so, yes, of course, everything matters. In that sense, and also because we sit in Jakarta, of course, Indonesia is a great country in many ways. It has proven in the past that it can manage a huge, a very massive growth and fast growth in IT load. It was the infancy. Now it's becoming more mature, also in terms of ecosystem, people building the data center. The grid has to be upgraded, but I see a good future if the tendency, the policies are going the right way. I see a very bright future also in the Philippines if they continue on that track. Once again, visibility from an investor perspective. You go where the population is, you go where the connectivity is, you know the drill. But of course, the grid is going to be a key element, and eventually it's going to be a power play. Okay, 20 megawatt, you can more or less deal with your grid. 30, 50, 100, 200, you cannot deal with the grid if the grid is bad. That's a power play. You go where the grid is, and where the grid is stable enough.
Thank you, Wandrille. And maybe we go to the last. I just want to maybe spare a few minutes if there's one or two questions from the audience later. And we still have Pak Toto here as well. But the last question, the topic I want to discuss also for today's session is, Bertrand, you mentioned that, the more you do this and technologies, it's a cost, right? And then we need financing structure and that to make all these projects all still make sense commercially. And how do you see this? What kind of financing structure and how do we structure it? In fact, to help support the growth of digital infrastructure, and how do you see structure like sustainability linked loan or bond help further this decarbonize digital infrastructure?
No, thank you. So big disclaimer for this answer. I assume that our Lord and Master and government will not solve the problem during COP28. So it's a world as of 2 weeks ago. Few aspects. First, growth would be spectacular. It's not linear, it's exponential. So you need more money. Because of course, but also multiplication of assets. So you need more different stack of capital coming. And we'll start with the simpler one, banks. If you were in this region in Asia 7, 8 years ago and willing to finance an hyperscale data center, I was in Australia in 2015. I can tell you we were only 2 banks. In Singapore, 1 bank, etc. Now you can find 30, 40. And what is always funny is that those people tell it's their specialty and they've always been there. Well, 5 years ago, they were absolutely ignorant on that. So banks, I don't think it's the issue. But you need to have more and more non-bank coming there. I think in terms of flavor and different stack of capital, we see more and more junior debt. We haven't seen big issuance of notes and bonds, but it will come for sure. This morning, I think I discussed with somebody about private credit. It will come as well. It's not always easy because for the moment in Southeast Asia in particular and in Asia, single assets are still relatively small. They get bigger and bigger, but relatively small when you have 200-300 million and you have a lot of appetite. And it's not always easy because you have multiple currencies in this region. So financing in Vietnam is not easy as well because of the currency. The transmission line for sure, but the currency as well. And lots of other technical difficulties. Then you have equity, so you have big platform, big regional player of cross-regional player that have invested a lot, but that are reaching a certain level of limits, single asset or single name limit, etc. So it will expand. I think, like in the tower business, there have been some tweak, splitting the asset into multiple parts, the real estate component, the operation component, etc. It will come. But gradually. So it's really onboarding more and more people. We're here also to do that and to make sure that, again, there is a need. There is no asset class that failed delivering because of lack of liquidity. But currently, it's a bit expensive.
Thanks, Bertrand. And I guess some of this structure requires some measuring KPIs and so on. And
very good point. I will elaborate on that. When we started doing the first SLL financing, it was in Australia. We had a few criteria. They are still very good, but we believe we'll have to make those criteria evolve. It's heavily centered around water usage, PUE, etc. But it may evolve depending on what the technology can bring. At the end of the day, no customer care about PUE, and who are we to judge? Because it's great to look at PUE for data center, but if you look at multiple other businesses, their PUE might be 2 or 3 times. I don't know what the PUE of my bank is. I don't know what the electricity is really used for the banking and used for non-banking activities. So it may not be the right criteria. I understand the KPI in terms of limiting the pass-through of electricity cost to the off-taker, but it's not what render an asset sustainable. It's not really you may have a very low PUE with servers that are totally sub-optimized and are consuming too much energy. So maybe other criteria need to be taken into account, and not only the PUE or just basic criteria that we are using today. We are working a lot on that. Impact of AI, for sure. Different flavor of AI. Impact of ethics as well. Is it really, again, we are talking about data center, not the off-taker, and most of the responsibility and accountability lies in the off-taker. Certain services, you may not want to host them.
Thank you. Paul, you anything to add? Or?
Yeah, so to that point, one of the things that we've done within our organization is we've taken sustainability very, very seriously, and we've actually created white paper that is available to all. So what the white paper does is it's called White Paper 67, and it demonstrates 23 key criteria for key factors for greenhouse gas, for energy, for water, for waste, and then in addition to that, it's got 17 additional industry standards and regulatory posts that are very, very useful for any data center provider, and that will help with the measurement and monitoring and control of all of the criteria to help support the sustainable loans that we've talked about.
Thank you. Maybe let's comment. Anything to add, Wandrille, or it's okay if not, we can ask.
Maybe you can take some questions from the audience.
Yeah. Do we have time for one question for me? One question. So, we'd like to invite maybe one question. I guess we are constrained with time, but we want to take this opportunity to take one question from you, from the audience. Anyone?
When is the cocktail?
No one? Going once? Okay. Thank you, Wandrille and Bertrand and Paul, and thank you everyone.